As a strong believer in biblical prophecy, Hechler came to recognize that the time for the restoration of the Jewish people back to their ancient homeland had come. And he viewed Theodor Herzl as divinely called to fulfill that role. And the next year, in 1896, the two would meet. Welcome to Israel Unveiled. I really enjoy reading about history. I have always found it fascinating to see how some, what seems like random events and people are destined to come together to change the world. In the next two podcasts, I want to share about two such relationships. In each, a Christian Gentile and a Jew come together to play a major role in the birth of the state of Israel. The first that I want to talk about today is with William Hechler, who is considered by some historians as the first modern Christian Zionist, and Theodor Herzl, who many call the father of Zionism. William Hechler was born in India in 1845 to a German Anglican missionary, Dietrich Heckler, and his English wife, Catherine. He received a conservative Christian education, and through that, William was introduced to evangelical restoration. That's a belief in the prophetic destiny of the Jewish people to return back to their ancient homeland. And then it would be followed not long after with the return of Jesus. He would dedicate his life toward that aim, becoming, as I mentioned, as looked upon as the most prominent Christian Zionist of his day. Certainly that was true. In his 20s, Hechler became chaplain to the British Embassy in Vienna. In his addition to his responsibilities in that role, he also tutored the son of Frederick I, the Grand Duke of Germany. He and Frederick developed a very close relationship, and years later, Hechler would draw on that relationship in a very significant way. Meanwhile, in the 1880s, persecution of the Jewish people in Russia greatly increased. For years, most Jews in Russia were forced to live in restricted areas that had been designated by the Russian authorities under the czars. And there they faced isolation, and many lived in poverty as there was very little opportunity for them. It was called the Pale of Settlement, and it wouldn't end until 1917. Hechler had heard about the dire situation and the increased persecution of the 5 million Jews who were living in the Pale of Settlement. And so he decided to go to Russia to see for himself. And while he was there, indeed, he saw firsthand how bleak life was for so many of the Jewish people. Impacted by what he had seen, he gathered together with other Christian Zionists to help Jews begin to escape to Palestine. Sometime in 1896, he read Theodor Herzl's Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, a work that greatly would impact Hechler's life. As a strong believer in biblical prophecy, Hechler came to recognize that the time for the restoration of the Jewish people back to their ancient homeland had come. And he viewed Theodor Herzl as divinely called to fulfill that role. And the next year, in 1896, the two would meet. It indeed was a relationship that would impact history. I shared about Theodor Herzl coming to his own revelation about a homeland for the Jews in an earlier podcast that I've done. It's called 3 Strands of Destiny, How Israel Was Reborn. And I really encourage you to go back and view that podcast on YouTube if you haven't already. But just briefly, Herzl came to Paris in 1895. He was a reporter for a newspaper, and he was assigned to report and write about a story of a Jewish French army captain, Alfred Dreyfus, who was falsely accused for treason, and he was placed on trial as a spy for the Ottoman Turks. He was innocent. It was there on assignment in Paris that Herzl firsthand saw the ugliness and the depth of anti-Semitism. He was shocked as the streets in Paris were filled day and night by the people crying out, "Hang the Jew." You know, Alfred Dreyfus was a patriotic Jew whose family had lived in France for generations, yet he was simply reduced to be a Jew. It was that experience that Herzl decided that there would ultimately never be a safe place for the Jewish people, where they could be safe from persecution and anti-Semitism. He realized through that experience that they needed their own homeland. It forever changed him and the direction of his life. He went on to write the next year, Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, and it was a work that actually presents a vision for the establishment of a Jewish state. That work would be the catalyst to bring about his relationship with Reverend Hechler. And it would provide the driving force, that relationship, for the Zionist movement. Of their first meeting, Herzl wrote this: "The Reverend William H. Hechler, chaplain to the British Embassy in Vienna, called on me. A likable, sensitive man with the long gray beard of a prophet, he waxed enthusiastic over my solution. He too regarded my movement as a prophetic crisis, one he foretold 2 years ago. When he read my book, he immediately hurried to Ambassador Munson, the British ambassador in Vienna, and told him, 'The foreordained movement is here. Hechler declares my movement to be a biblical one, even though I proceed rationally in all points. He wants to place my tract in the hands of some German princes. He used to be a tutor in the household of the Grand Duke of Baden. He knows the German Kaiser and thinks he can get me an audience.'" Hechler quickly befriended Herzl, and using the relationship with Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany and Sultan Abdul Hamid of the Ottoman Empire that he had built 20 years before, he did get Herzl the audience with those key leaders. The Holy Land at that time was still under the Ottoman control. Hechler was the key that opened the doors of influence for Theodor Herzl. The introduction brought legitimacy to Herzl and to his message of a homeland for the Jewish people. In a wonderful and a very insightful article that was written by Jerry Klinger, who is president of the Jewish American Society for Historic Preservation, he wrote in April of 2011 this. He said Herzl had no experience or entrees into any of the major European royal courts of power. He did not know how to dress or even address royalty. Hechler was his teacher. Hechler was his counselor. And over time, Hechler became Herzl's first Christian friend. In another article that he wrote for the Jerusalem Post, it said, "It has been long recognized that without Hechler's intercession and support, Herzl may have simply remained an obscure, eccentric Viennese journalist. The course of Zionism, and possibly the very founding of the modern state of Israel, may not have been successful." Theodor Herzl and the movement that he founded gained credibility. In 1897, 208 Jewish Zionists from 17 countries met in Basel, Switzerland for the very first Zionist conference. And it was there that the commitment and the plans for the foundation of the modern state of Israel was set. The partnership and the friendship of Reverend Hechler and Theodor Herzl made that possible. Herzl would write in his diary right after that first conference, he said this, "Perhaps in 5 years, but certainly in 50, there will be a Jewish state." And 50 years later, 1947, UN Resolution 181 established the division of the land of the former Palestine under the British into a Jewish state and an Arab state. On May 14th, less than a year later, 1948, the nation of Israel was birthed. Neither man actually lived long enough to see the birth of the Jewish state in 1948, but history certainly marks their significant role in laying the foundation for it. Hechler was constantly at Herzl's side until Herzl's death in 1904. He's buried in Mount Herzl Military Cemetery in Jerusalem. I've been there to view that. A very moving experience. William Hechler died in London in 1931, and he's buried in northern London. Two men destined to meet, to help in laying the foundation for the birth of the state of Israel. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. And if you have, I would ask and hope that you would click like and share. And to see more podcasts like this, would you click subscribe? Until the next time, be blessed and shalom.